The Who the Folk podcast is sponsored by Jewfolk Inc., which is hosting its first in-person fundraising event, Folkfest, on October 30th at Minnesota Hillel. From music and art to food and fun, Folkfest 22 will be a celebration for you. In order to celebrate the 10,000 Ways to be Jewish, Folkfest will have an array of activities, including fun for the family, hands-on crafts, and interesting speakers. The festival will culminate with a special acoustic solo concert from Minnesota's own Peter Himmelman. For more information and to buy your tickets, go to tcjewfolk.com/folkfest. Welcome to this week's 200th episode of the Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jewfolk. This week I talk with writer, comedian, and performer Jon Savitt. We talk about where his interest in the world of entertainment started, creating content, and launching his new business, Campfire Creative, on this week's Who the Folk podcast. Jon Savitt, welcome to the 200th episode of the Who the Folk podcast. Thank you for joining me.
200. Wow.
I know. Who would have thought that, 4.5 years ago, almost 4.5 years ago when this started, that we'd still be doing this.
I guess my question is, why me for the 200th? I feel like I'm not worthy of the 200th episode.
Oh, no, I think you are. First of all, you're funny. So, I'm counting on getting some laughs here. And second of all, you're like, we've talked before. We've talked on Zoom a lot, particularly over the pandemic, but now you're back in Minnesota. So, like, it's a perfect time to have you on, because we do try to talk to Minnesotans for this show. So it's great to have you back in the Twin Cities to do this.
That's very kind, and I'm happy to be here, and could not be doing anything else, because it was either this or sitting by myself in my apartment and probably scrolling through Twitter. So this is the best case scenario for everyone involved.
Well, excellent. Nothing good comes from doom scrolling.
Ever. Nothing ever.
Nothing. So you are back in Minnesota. You were in DC for quite a while. What was it?
What felt like 30 years.
DC has a way of doing that to people, doesn't it?
I literally lost all my hair. Quite literally. People say that, but I quite literally did.
This is not a visual medium, so Jon just lifted up his hat.
As if you couldn't tell before. I'm like doing a big reveal. I'm like...
Well, I knew that because I saw you a couple weeks ago at the Dakota, but for the people listening, DC cost Jon his hair.
Yeah, it was a risk I had to take, and I can't say that that it paid off, but who knows? Who knows?
So what is it that brought you home?
A couple things. So, first and foremost, obviously everyone was trying to kind of navigate this pandemic in different ways. Mm-hmm. So, I was out there for 7 or 8 years, but really it was in 2020, kind of during the height of the pandemic, where I was looking around and I kind of had this reflection of, what am I doing here? And there was a couple of compounding factors. I was like, I miss my family. I miss my friends. Why am I in this dense, kind of city where you can't really be outside and there's no green space? I had roommates, which shout out to my roommates, love them, still talk to them every day, but we were all working from home on top of each other. And I was like, I could be just, biking on trails and go into the Mississippi. And so that's kind of what brought me back here.
That's, as good a reason as any.
No, I think so.
So you're a sort of jack of many trades. I'm not going to say all of them, because there's lots of trades out there. But
definitely not all of them.
But you're a writer, you're a comedian, you do stand-up, you perform. How did you get into, I guess, broadly the entertainment world?
Yeah, it's kind of weird, because nowhere along my path should I have ever belonged in this space. I don't think. Growing up in St. Louis Park, that was never on my radar as a thing you could do.
Okay.
Going to school in Indiana for college was never on my radar. That just wasn't really what people were doing, what my friend group was doing. It's so it's so ambiguous anyway to even understand how to break in there. If you don't have connections or anything or a clear roadmap, then you certainly have no idea of how you would get there. And so really it came about because my interests started aligning, which were like, what am I good at? I like making people laugh. I like kind of bringing joy to different spaces. I like communicating. How can I bring all those things together and hopefully make money from it? And that was kind of where I started out. And then the short answer is, when I was a senior at IU, Indiana, I got a piece published in College Humor, which was like a big, kind of publication for that time, or website, when kind of the whole digital media landscape was coming about. And I was like, oh wow, that was the first time I made money off of my write-in. And that was kind of like and it was like nothing. It was like $20. I was like, great, I can buy, a 6-pack or something.
Right.
But that was the first point where I thought, wow, maybe I could, if I work hard enough, if I kind of sit down and really think this out, maybe there is something here I could explore. And then it kind of took off from there.
If $20 bought you a 6-pack, you were drinking really good beer in college.
The best.
Better beer than college students should be drinking.
I went up to the counter and I said, give me your best. They're like, you're not of age. They're like, please turn around. I was like, give me your best beer. I'll take one of the best beers, please. And put my 20 down.
Yes. So what brought you to DC then? Because obviously DC is not where you expect somebody who's got an interest in entertainment to go.
Yes. Well, it is pretty funny there, but not for the right reasons. I think the common pattern, which when I talk about this, it always comes about, is the commonality or this kind of through line between everything is that I have no idea what I'm doing. And so every question is like, how did you get into this? And the answer is, I don't know. And it was funny when I got to DC, one of the first people I met with was Al Franken, because he grew up in St. Louis Park. Mm-hmm. He gave my commencement speech when I was in high school. He obviously has the background in comedy and politics. And so he asked me too, he's like, okay, so why did you come to DC? Like, what are you doing here? But really what it was about was I started thinking about where places where I could align my interests, which were comedy, writing, and just like doing good, basically. I think that was the other really powerful pillar that I have followed, whether it was working at summer camp, which I did all my life. I mean, even to this day, I'm like, that was the most meaningful experience of my life, was working at Herzl, and doing mentorship opportunities and doing any kind of work for nonprofits or volunteering. And I knew I didn't want to lose that. And sometimes comedy and writing especially can be such a almost like selfish act. I mean, a lot of the times it quite literally is me, and you probably know this too.
Yes.
You lock yourself in a room and you're like, me, can't talk to anyone, need to focus. And I knew I didn't want to lose like the other part of me that was like being around people and trying to help people and try to make people, believe in themselves and reach their potential. So I started thinking of like, how could I bring all these things together? And that got me to DC.
And I think that's sort of what I love about journalism, is that it's not just script writing or novel writing or column writing. It's that, yes, I get to write, but I also get to spend chunks of my day sometimes talking to people about interesting stuff and the things that they're doing. And I love when I get to talk to somebody and learn new things. Absolutely. As cliche as that sounds, it's the best parts of my day.
For sure. No, I 100% agree with that. And actually, so I didn't minor in journalism, but I spent a lot of my college days studying journalism. Okay. I have like a certificate in like whatever that means, some BS. They're like, you took enough classes.
You took enough classes. It's not a minor, not quite a minor, but.
And you can't do anything with it, but like, I guess you can use it on podcasts. Right. But part of that, which has stuck with me, and I'll bring this kind of full circle in a second, is that I love the idea of storytelling and of learning people's stories. I mean, at the heart of writing, at the heart of telling jokes, at the heart of comedy, it's stories and narrative. And so that's why I grew up with like The Daily Show and The Colbert Report, Samantha Bee, like all these. I love that intersection of like politics, policy, news, humor, make it digestible and in a fun way. And so that's really like where I wanted to play in.
For sure. I mean, you look at The Daily Show alumni,
It's everyone.
Right. I mean, the names of people who have been on that show are...
It's scary.
It's ridiculous.
It doesn't make sense.
No, there's no reason that show should have spawned the people and the empires that it has, but it has.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it is definitely where comedy and policy and nonsense all sort of interact.
Exactly. And I thought that was so fun. I mean, the idea of what I kind of describe whenever I have to give my kind of like, pitch to people, I'm always like punchlines meets purpose. So whatever I do, I want it to have meaning. And sometimes, that it doesn't have to be so like heady. It can be dumb. Right. But no matter what I want to do, I want there to be some kind of intention or meaning there, or to educate or to inspire, to help people think about something in a different way. Yeah.
I mean, that's really important, because that's how we learn things, but it also, I think, helps us grow when it helps us see things in a different light, which is important, I think, at least. People may disagree, but like, people also, maybe they're not in it for the same reasons. No. So who's to say? So one of your newer endeavors, which I believe you just launched about 6 or so weeks ago, is Campfire Creative, which, just by looking at the website, does sound a lot of where the punchlines meets purpose kind of vibe. Tell me a little more about that. Yeah,
I mean, so to back up a little bit, so I was working at an ad agency in DC for the whole time I was in DC. Okay. So like 7 or 8 years. I came back here, and I decided it was time to kind of take a leap of faith and, really just kind of focus on what I want to be doing and what makes me truly happy. And so I decided to go freelance full time. Okay. And so for the last actually almost exactly a year at this point, I've just kind of been writing full time. And so Campfire Creative came about because I wanted a more simple and clear way to show people what I'm about and what I'm doing and how I can work with other cool people. And so I decided to launch that, which is essentially a strategic storytelling studio. Okay. So all about words, all about using the right language in the right places, whether you're a, organization, nonprofit, startup, small business, maybe, individual who is looking for messaging support, or whether you're a production studio and you're looking for a script, or you're looking for someone to bring on the writer's room or a team, mm-hmm. or something like that. So it runs the gamut of what I do, but essentially that's just a really exciting, almost just rebrand of things I've already been doing, okay. but kind of making it official and saying, this is here now. This is real. And this is what I plan to be doing, for the foreseeable future.
As opposed to just being a freelancer.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just a freelancer. That's not how I meant it. I know plenty of people. We have run articles from plenty of people on Jufolk who are just, I'm using air quotes here, freelancers, as opposed to people who, work for someone else.
Totally. I think what I was running into, and I don't know if this will be valuable for anyone listening to this, but what I was running into was kind of like the conversations we're having now, where it's kind of like to actually understand someone and to know what they enjoy doing and what they're about and what they're good at. You almost have to have these kind of conversations. Right. And it got to the point I was realizing where no one could really put a label on me, because they were like, oh, you're a comedy writer, but you're a comedian, but you also have like a decade of experience working in agencies. Right. Like what do you do? And it got to the point where I was like, why don't I just put it all in one place and send that to you, versus us having to kind of go through this conversation every time we want to do something.
You basically created the elevator pitch in a better package.
Exactly. Yeah.
Has it helped?
It's helped a lot. Okay. Yeah, it's helped a lot. Just being able to kind of clarify things in a really quick manner, so mm-hmm. people can get a better sense of how we can do business. I mean, the tough part is, which I don't want to bore anyone with these details, but writing, I don't know if you know this, it doesn't pay a lot of money for freelancers or anyone.
I am familiar with it.
So so you really have to be creative about what business you try to go after, how you kind of present yourself, what different avenues of revenue you have coming in, because, and I try to be really transparent about this, because part of the reason, bringing this back to like entertainment comedy, part of the reason it's been so gatekeepy and kept so many specific types of people out of it is because you have to like demystify what it's about. And you're kind of like, you look at these people and you're like, how are you, like, do you have a job? Did someone give you money? Did you get, started because of relative help? I mean, there's like so many things. And when you really boil it down, there are a lot of people who aren't just like full-time comedians or comedy writers. No. Everyone has second jobs. Maybe they work day jobs. I mean, all these things. So the reality is that some months it's like, you sell a script, you write in, it's all good. But then some months you need something else to do to make money. That's just how it goes. And so I try to make that like really transparent, that it's not all, just fun and, lights and glitter and everything, that there's a lot that goes into it if you want to take this path.
For sure, because the finished product that people see on stage or on screen or wherever they're watching you doesn't take into account, like they don't see the hundreds of hours often of work and writing and refining and editing and tweaking that goes, and workshopping that goes into what they actually see.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. And even then, I think there's a lot of like discrepancies between, they're like, oh, you performed an hour show on stage. You must have made like $15,000. And I'm like, no, what? like, where are you getting that number from?
Wish.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of discrepancies when it comes to just like demystifying like comedy, the entertainment business in general, and everything that kind of goes into it, especially these days when everything's kind of changing and evolving. So I'm also, I don't know if we're going to talk about this either, but this kind of reminded me that I also launched something called the Minneapolis Writers Room, which is basically a free program for high school aged students in Minnesota to just learn comedy. So that's also what I'm doing, because trying to demystify again the whole process. And
it's funny, you just told that anecdote of performing on stage for an hour and you made what, and I keep thinking of the Lucille Bluth gif from Arrested Development. What could a banana cost? $10?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like people have no idea.
It's like what is it? Ask a politician like how much a gallon of milk costs or something.
Oh,
and see
yeah.
How it's like that same thing.
The line that arguably cost George Bush Sr. the 92 election.
Right.
Yeah, it's people have no idea. In part because it feels so out there. Like seeing people who perform stuff is just, it's just, different world.
It doesn't make sense that should be a job, I think, is like
right. And I think that's with anybody who like steps on stage to do stuff. I mean, like we saw each other at the Potash Twin show a couple weeks ago, and like those are your friends that are on stage playing music for an hour and a half or whatever, and it just, that's a thing they do. They tour around the country and they're also making TV shows, and they're all like, that's a thing that regular people do. It's just a job.
Yeah.
But
no.
What?
Yeah. It's hard to wrap your head around. And I think part of that is like this systemic thing, which is like, I mean, I've been very aware of this, obviously going through this, but like people saying, this is what a job is. This is what isn't. This is how you make money. This is how you don't. This is what success is. This doesn't count as success.
Right.
And so you're never, and especially, I mean, again, it's one thing. I have friends who, grew up in LA, New York, where it was kind of like, oh yeah, maybe I can do this. But growing up in Minnesota, Indiana, spending time in the Midwest, it was no one ever said, oh, why don't you go be a comedian, or why don't you try writing comedy?
No, it's people forget about us. We're flyover country.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of true. And I think what has really informed my perspective, and part of the reason I'm really happy I went and lived on the East Coast for so long, is because I kind of now have these like different understandings of, and that's all, I always say there's no right or wrong. It's just really interesting to understand where people come from and understand their backgrounds and their stories, and learn about things from that way. So I'm really happy I've kind of, been all over the place.
Yeah. I think that helps. I think it gives you perspective.
Yeah. And I think perspective is, it's the reason why I always tell. So I did minor in sociology in college.
Interesting.
So I will give my sociology minor a very rare plug.
Okay.
But that is the one thing, like when I talk to writers or whoever, I'm like, take sociology classes. Like that was the one thing. It wasn't math. It wasn't science. I mean, whatever. It was sociology for me. That was like, you have a pretty limited perspective of things. And especially if you're going to be trusted telling other people's stories or working with people's stories, like you need to be more empathetic and put yourself in people's shoes. And I think that's critical. It's why a lot of the times you see like comedians or writers like trip over themselves because they try to deliver something that they think is a punchline, but they end up, punching down because they don't quite understand the nuances of someone's experience.
Right.
And so I think just like more empathy and compassion and learning about different stories is good.
I don't know. The math and micro and macroeconomics classes that I had to take as part of my major in journalism, not really helping me out much. So I probably would have been a little better spent doing sociology work for a little bit.
So bad at math. It is. I mean, that's why I went into writing. It is painful. That's why I went into creative work. I'm no good there. Barely graduated college with those credits.
Yeah, it was. I just needed I did better than just passing, but hardly ace those classes. Just get by.
They're tough. Those ones are tough.
Yes. I don't understand why people who work in a creative space need to do that.
And you don't. And what I've learned is you don't need to know that.
No.
Unless you're dealing with budgets and all of that, which is a different beast.
So I want to go back to the Minneapolis Writers Room project. How did that start? And like, who are you working with? I mean, you don't have to give me names because obviously they're probably minors.
Yeah, I have their details, their personal details right here. I can send you.
Yes, just send those over. That's great. So how did that come together? What was the inspiration for that project?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like I think it's of anything. It's like built out of this frustration of like gatekeepers and people saying like, this is the way to do it. This isn't. This is who can do it. This is who can't. And it kind of just, makes people, and me included, fed up. What really occurred was during the pandemic, I started getting a lot more opportunities that I couldn't get before because people started opening their writer's room to, people across the country. And they said, actually, you don't have to live in LA or New York. If you're talented, you're talented. We'd like to have you on our team. And so I saw a huge skyrocket in that. And I just started thinking like, why can't we continue this trend and keep giving opportunities to people who, can't afford to move places or have other jobs or duties they have to, take care of.
Right.
And I think there's a small group of people who can just like be like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to pack up my stuff and move here tomorrow and hope I make it.
Right.
I never did that. And so I really wanted to I didn't invent this by any means. I'm just kind of hopping on the trend of like democratizing comedy and entertainment and hopefully helping some other people discover that, oh, maybe I can, if not do this as my full-time profession, at least do it as a really meaningful hobby in my life, something that I take with me. Basically, I started this because it's something that I wish I would have had when I was that age, when I was being introduced to what my future career could look like. I think I would have found a lot of meaning in having something like this that I could think about and work on.
Has the response been pretty strong so far? At least getting some calls about it? Obviously, it's a fairly new project anyway. So.
Yeah, it's a really good question because it is a really interesting case study of, to be honest, I thought I think the Star Tribune covered it. I was on NPR to talk about it. So it's not like nobody knows about it.
Right.
But I was kind of expecting everyone, email after email, phone call after phone call,
sure.
like, hey, cancel my meetings. I'm going to have to take care of this. But It's been a lot slower than that. I mean, definitely people have reached out. There's been a handful of people and so I'm trying to figure out, is it still that, kind of foreign of a concept where people are like, that's not a thing, or maybe parents are like, I don't want my kid going down that road, or I'm not sure what it is exactly. But there hasn't been like a huge jump from people to join the program, but there definitely have been a few really inspired, motivated students who have reached out and been like, this is exactly what I'm looking for, which that's all I need,
But also I think there's so much utility to something like this, because like taking these classes with you doesn't mean you're going to end up in a, Hollywood or New York writer's room at some point.
It does. We call it the Jon Savitt to SNL pipeline.
Oh, well then never mind. Forget my question. I was going to say that there's opportunities to take, for writing like that, to work in lots of different opportunities.
For sure. 100%. I mean, it's kind of that same thing as like bringing it back to my sociology, like about how that can apply to so many different things, like comedy, writing. We always talk about improv is a really, I think, big example that, they have business people going to take improv classes and bring in the office because there are so many ways you can apply this type of work to even if it's not even professionally, but on a personal level,
right.
Get into, be a little more confident in conversations, or really drilling down to find the core of someone's story, or what, makes someone, or how to communicate effectively. I mean, there's so many things. You're right. Even if people don't want to follow my path, which I wouldn't necessarily encourage people to do so, if I'm being quite honest. But there are definitely tons of other things you can learn from a class like this.
You also don't want that kind of competition coming in the pipeline behind you. Like, go do other things, people.
Yeah, this is my territory.
That's right. It's my lane. Yeah. Get your own.
No, actually, I would love that, because I always say if you go on to do something, then you have to hire me, is the rule.
That's actually not a bad rule. That's keep yourself employable that way.
Exactly. It's a business strategy. And also, going back to camp, I'm always such a big advocate for like, kids are smarter than me, and kids are smarter than most people.
Yes.
And I've learned that firsthand. I mean, through whether being a camp counselor or leading something like the OZO program at Herzl. I mean, I think people really underestimate kids and youth in general. And so I'm like, honestly, here's all I know. It might be helpful. It might not. You might be able to take this and go way farther than I can. And that's what I want. Like, that's great.
I think the other opportunity that is not only out there for kids, but I will say kids are certainly adopting it better than me, but I think better than certainly a lot of people, is the use of social media, and for all of the things that are terrible about it. And there are plenty. We're not going to list them all here, but there's just so many more content creation opportunities out in the internet and the universe than certainly I ever had at a similar age, and certainly more than you ever had. And, you're a fair piece younger than I am even. And so like the writing opportunities that you're giving kids, it doesn't have to go to Hollywood. It doesn't have to go to New York. It can be done in their basement with TikTok, and can still be really, really, really freaking funny.
Exactly. And I think that's the whole thing, is like, again, going back to democratizing comedy. Right. I mean, I know that's the dream, is always like, oh, I want to be on the Hollywood set, but that the dream kind of evolves and changes and has to evolve and adapt with the times. And so, social media has created tons of opportunities for people, which I think is amazing. And again, you have kind of those gatekeeper type people who are like, well, that's not real comedy. Like, that doesn't count. If you're not on a stage by yourself with a microphone, then that's not, it's sorting it into boxes.
Right.
But why not create more opportunities for more people to express themselves this way? And it only gets better, and it should only increase competition and collaboration, and make people better, and make people have to actually explore, different content and different mediums, and explore, maybe the way they think about themselves. And I personally think it's only, good. It might be uncomfortable, especially for people like me who maybe I could never do. No one wants to see this face on TikTok. So I know that's out for me, but I think it's so cool that you have someone, you know, in wherever, just, you know, picking up their phone and being able to connect with their followers in such a funny and creative way.
I mean, and funny is funny.
I agree.
Like I mean, that's always been the case. Some stand-up, you know, some types of stand-up aren't for everybody. And that's going to be the same for whatever medium you want to use. For
sure. And for any creative, you know, vehicle or, you know, art in general, it's not going to be for everyone because there's no one formula. And I think that's kind of the exciting part and how it connects with various people. So, and I've never really understood, you know, like when I look at something that I don't necessarily find funny, as long as it's not hurting someone or, you know, in that way, I kind of just continue with my life.
Right.
I don't need to stop and tell everyone that, hey, by the way, this isn't funny or this doesn't count. So I don't really understand why people feel the need to like almost make it a point to be like, this doesn't count. You can just kind of go on with your life and not be bothered by it.
And we had this discussion at, well, places, Rosh Hashanah dinner. I'm not going to say the movie that I didn't find funny, that the entire...
Say it.
Napoleon Dynamite.
Oh, wow.
I got 20 minutes in and I'm like, I'm not feeling it. My wife and I are like, no, we're done. I'm out. I mean, hold my interest. And the entire table of adults was like, you're dopes. What is your problem?
Yeah, I mean, this is shocking news. It's taken me a second to kind of comprehend this.
I can tell you really do look a little put out by the whole thing.
But at least even with that though, like I can see why that doesn't resonate with people. Like I'm not shocked by it. I don't know. So, and people are entitled to their opinions, and who cares?
Exactly. I'm not wrong. Family. Thank you for that. I needed
this just turned like really personal.
I know, this took a turn. Well, to keep it personal, last couple questions, and we'll let you get back to writing or doom scrolling on Twitter.
Probably
whatever you want.
Probably it's a Monday, so probably not that productive. So.
Perfect. So whatever you want to do then with your day. What is your favorite Jewish food?
Oh, okay. That's tough. I love a good knish.
Okay.
I love a good knish. I mean, cliche, but matzo ball soup.
Sure.
It's always going to be up there, no matter what. Latkes. I like the fried stuff.
Anybody's knish or matzo ball soup in particular? Or latkes, I suppose. They name 3 foods.
Yeah. There's this really good place called Trader Joe's. And
I've heard of it.
Yeah, Mr. Joe makes a mean latke.
All right.
Yeah, well, the other part is, since I haven't been back here for that long, now I also have to rediscover all the places I can go to get the good Jewish food. So I need tips on that.
There's not many places, so it should take you a weekend.
That's why it's tough.
Yeah.
But I know, I can always trust Byerly's to have some good stuff.
That's always safe too. And what is your favorite Jewish holiday?
My favorite Jewish holiday, I really like Passover. I feel like I answered that way too quickly.
You didn't. Most people, there's an interesting mix of people who can answer that question right away. And for the food one too. The food one usually takes a little more hemming and hawing, I'll admit. People usually jump all over it like a batting practice fastball. They just clobber it.
Good. I feel like people are going to be like, that guy likes Passover way too much.
No, and Passover is the most popular answer.
Okay.
And for a storyteller, I can actually kind of see why that.
So I think that is why so first of all, there's a lot of different senses going on. Yeah. There's a lot of like visual there. There's the story. There's the food that you're actually bringing into making it like actually intentional with praying and with, gathering your family and all of that. So I just think, thinking about this from a really like boring, like overanalyzing perspective, I love the idea of like intentionality and reflecting in various ways and not in traditional manner. So it doesn't have to be, sitting down and praying by yourself. It can be what you feel through taste. It can be what you feel through, just having conversations, really timely conversations with people, at the table, and how some of those themes that we've talked about from so many years ago still apply today. And I just think there's so many fascinating ways to kind of interpret that. And just quick shout out to Shabbat. Love Shabbat.
No, Shabbat's a good time too. Challah. Can't go wrong.
I feel very attached to Shabbat too. And I rediscovered it when I was in DC because I had all my roommates were non-Jews. And so we would, with a big group of people, Jews and non-Jews, we would celebrate Shabbat every week. And it became this really again, kind of, I like the way in Judaism you can rediscover things. Yeah. Like my Judaism today is not at all what it was when I was a kid. And probably will be different down the line as well.
Sure.
And that's what I love about it. And so that kind of made me rediscover, reappreciate Shabbat and what it can bring. And I just think it's a great thing. Go Shabbat.
I mean, and that's so much of there's so much choose your own adventure in Judaism in general that, sort of reinventing yourself and how your Judaism shapes you as you get older. I mean, I think how I practice now is very different than how I certainly practiced when I was, my kid's age.
For sure. Yeah. I would say, I don't know if I always think about this because I don't know if I've become more religious or less. It's just changed so much where I've really been able to almost grow into a better, deeper appreciation. And it's not that I'm going to synagogue more than I did. It's that I've been able to just kind of appreciate various aspects of Judaism, kind of taken it to be my own.
Right.
And I've really enjoyed that as I've grown up.
And I don't think it has to be more or less religious necessarily. It's just different at different stages.
I agree. Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And, maybe this is a conversation for another time, but the relationship between Judaism and humor and comedy too, I think has really became more crystallized as I've grown older and followed this as well. So I think there's just a ton of different facets that I've been exploring, which has been really meaningful.
Well, I mean, there's a long history of obvious, Jewish comedians, Jewish writers. It's like you're following sort of in the footsteps of a lot of people.
A lot of people.
A lot of people.
There's a lot out there.
Oh, Jon Savitt, thank you so much for joining me. This was great to do this in person back here in Minnesota. And we will have links to Campfire Creative and all of your work and where people can find you in the show notes. But it was a pleasure to do this. Thank you for being here for episode 200. I appreciate it.
200. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
The Who the Folk podcast is part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network, a product of Jew Folk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.